to Voices of the West. Today we have the pleasure of having LeRoy Peters join us again. LeRoy, welcome back. Always good to have you here.
It feels great to be back.
Now, LeRoy, you've got a new book that just came out on the market. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's the first book in my new series called The Frontier. The name of the book's called Face of the Sun. Um, unlike unlike all my other books I've done, I'd say this one's my favorite because all my characters from all my other books are more mimicked after my dad. This character, Lazarus Buchanan, is more me. And also the story is set in 1810, like after between Lewis and Clark and the War of 1812. So basically, Lazarus Buchanan, he's the son of Scottish immigrants. His maternal uncle comes home for a visit. His uncle's a mountain man who rode with John Coulter, who was taught by John Coulter, and he comes home for a visit and basically tells his nephew and his brothers about the West, about everything he encountered and everything. And Lazarus, who just got expelled from school for fighting and doesn't want to work on a pig farm, decides that being a trapper is what he wants to do. So he convinces his uncle to take him back west with him, which he does. And it's of all the stories I've ever written, this one's probably the best one I've ever written because, again, it's set in the 1810s before the war of 1812. And like I said, the character is more he's impulsive, he's hot-tempered, but he's willing to learn, and he tries to be patient, and everything that his uncle teaches him, he soaks it up. And before long, he establishes himself as a successful trapper. And the story, like I've already gotten 5 and 4-star reviews already.
Excellent.
And what was amazing is that my last book, the 6th book in the saga of the Armstrong Brothers series, it was published back in November. And I was already planning on writing this, but I was planning on waiting until January, February, start writing it. But for some reason, I already had the story and synopsis written down in my journal, but but it kept playing on in my head, and I couldn't even sleep at night. So I talked to Nick, and Nick told me, "Don't wait till January or February. Do it. Start writing now." So by the end of November of last year, I started writing it, and by December 24th, I had it completed and submitted to Dusty Saddle.
Yeah, that was a fast turnaround you did there on this one.
Yep, and it was published, but the Kindle was published January 21st, and the paperback just got published on February 1st.
So you are all set up there. That's excellent. So tell us a little bit about the book, and particularly the inspiration for the character comes from you. What attributes of you are we seeing in Lazarus here?
Well, basically, when I was a teenager, I couldn't wait to grow up and move out of my parents' house, and I needed freedom. I didn't feel like I was having that kind of freedom at home, and that's the reason why I went into the service. And ironically, Lazarus' uncle, his maternal uncle, joined the military before he became a trapper. Another thing that's similar between Lazarus' family is that he's a son of immigrants. I'm the son of an immigrant. Um, his maternal grandfather is a retired professional boxer. And a lot of people don't realize how old the sport of boxing is. It goes back to the Roman Empire times. And just so happens on both sides of my family, I have family members who dabbled in the sport of boxing, amateur boxing. But so I put that in there. And like Lazarus, like me, is very hot-tempered. Well, I was hot-tempered growing up, and I can't count the number of fights I've been in. The only difference is he actually won most of his fights. And like I said, he just got expelled from school, so enough said.
Very good. So what is Lazarus going to be discovering here? Because most of your books have all been set roughly in the 1830s, that type of thing. You're jumping back here. What is he going to discover that's different here?
Well, because this is like right around the War of 1812. The story covers from 1810 to 1830. So Lazarus, he's only 16 years old, so he has to grow up real fast. And one of the first things is when he kills his first man, not in cold blood, but in defense of his uncle on the battlefield. It's the first time he ever killed a person, and he does it after it's done and said and done. It bothers him. And his uncle, not only his uncle tries to tell him it will pass, but even some of the Indian friends that he encounters, who basically whose side he was fighting on against another enemy tribe, they tell him it will pass. The trick, what his uncle tells him, the trick is when it comes to killing, you don't take to liking to it, because the uncle has actually seen men who've gone from killing out of necessity to killing out of pleasure. And for me as a veteran who served in the military, I guess I was very fortunate that I never had to pull the trigger. Even though I did 6 months in Iraq, I was very fortunate not to have been on the battlefield. But I'm sure I've talked to a lot of guys who are veterans, and who've been wounded. While I was in Iraq, I volunteered in the hospital. I've seen guys who've been through it. So, and I can only I can I don't know I can imagine, what Laz. So you kind of understand what Laz was kind of going through, especially after he takes a life. And unfortunately, I don't know if it's unfortunate or fortunately for him, but if he could, he would live in peace with everybody. But in reality, that's not the case. So in order for him to survive, not just for him to survive, but also to protect the people that he loves. I don't want to say too much of the story, but to protect the people that he loves, he has to kill. He just doesn't like doing it. But it's necessity in order to survive. It's either kill or be killed. And what's also different about this book is, I'd say, it's less religious than, like, Laz is not an atheist. I don't create atheist characters, but he's more spiritual. But growing up, like for me, growing up in a very strong Christian household, it can be suffocating at times. That's another reason why I went in the military. And also, in a way, that's kind of the reason why Lazarus convinced his uncle to take him out west, because to understand true freedom. And also because out west during this time, west of the Mississippi River, a man, and men and women only answered to God and themselves. Those who still believed in God, everything else was basically self-reliant. That's what true freedom was all about.
Oh yeah, they were completely out there on their own. There was no infrastructure, no backup, no anything coming through there. It's sort of like he set up a trading post and walked several weeks to get there.
It's funny. A couple of days ago, I was at my uncle's house, and we were watching Mountain Men on the History Channel. And I'm looking at these guys. I'm like, Jim Bridger, Kit Carson, Jedediah Smith, even John Coulter would laugh at these guys, because even these guys have, even though they say they're self-reliant, living off the land, they still have stuff that you buy at a store in order, like tools and stuff. The guys I write about, the guys who lived during the fur trade, they had to improvise, just like the Indians did. Indians made their own tools. They lived the way the Indians lived. So the only reality show I have at least some respect for is Life Below Zero, the first Alaskans. Because because they're native, and they've been doing this for thousands of years. So, but even they have necessities that you buy and that you pay for. But most of the time, they try to be more self-reliant than what you see on the History Channel on Mountain Men.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, it's kind of a lost art being completely self-reliant, because most of the time you don't need to anymore.
Yeah. My certain members of my family said I wouldn't have survived out there, and maybe they're right, but you don't know what a man if a man's desperate enough in order to live that he wants to live, he'll do you'd be surprised how far they're willing to go.
Oh yeah, and what those guys did was beyond imagination to at least to the modern age. It's like you're
I,
going to the complete wilderness with people who are hostile everywhere around you, potentially wild animals and freezing weather and everything you could possibly go wrong. You're living in the middle of it all.
Yeah, one key thing I put in the novel is the story of John Coulter. Like I said, the Lazarus' uncle was trained by John Coulter. By the time Lazarus and his uncle Amos arrive in St. Louis, they arrive in St. Louis around the same time John Coulter arrives in St. Louis from the West. And what a lot of historians don't think talk about is I think John Coulter may have suffered from PTSD after his third and final experience with the Blackfeet, because he said in 1810 when he was at Three Forks, if God let me off this one last time, I'll leave here the day after tomorrow, and I'll be damned if I ever come back in this country again. I think Coulter, if you're familiar with his story and his experiences at Three Forks, he may have suffered from PTSD, or well, they didn't call it PTSD back then; they called shell shock. Also, I try to, as far as the Blackfeet is concerned, the Blackfeet were the lords of the Northern Plains. There's no if, ands, or about it. They were they were to the Northern Plains what the Comanches were to the Southern Plains, and they were enemies of just about every other tribe except for the Grovant or the Tsena. But the Blackfeet had, from my understanding, two reasons to hate the trappers or the American trappers. One, because of Meriwether Lewis, who in 1806 at the Two Medicine River murdered two Blackfoot teenagers. She shot one of them in the back, and one of the other guys stabbed the other one. And also because of the beaver. The beaver is considered was I don't know if it still is, but for those who are traditional, but the beaver was considered sacred to the Blackfeet. So when you had these these white men and some black men coming into their territory trying to trap an animal that's sacred to them, the only way they could react was through violence. It would be, for them, it's the equivalent of burning down a Christian church or Catholic cathedral. So I explain a lot of that in the story
Mhm.
because people need to realize, why many of the tribes were the way they were.
Yeah, it wasn't just savages out there just attacking things because they could. There were reasons for it. And people coming
Yes.
into a new territory, they break rules they didn't even know necessarily even existed. Or
Yeah.
sometimes they're just trying to make money anyways and didn't really care. But yeah,
Yeah. I think for John Coulter, he was on his way. In fact, in summer of 1809, he was on his way back to St. Louis when he bumped into Manuel Lisa and Andrew Henry and his friend George Juilliard. And they convinced him to go back to Three Forks with them. And John Coulter was like, hell no. But then for some reason, I guess he felt safety in numbers. But by this time, he already had two near-death experiences with the Blackfeet. And Three Forks was in Blackfoot country. That's where it had the large population of beaver. And but after that, John Coulter was like, I'm done. And he was considered the bravest, toughest of all the trappers who came out there. And he's like, I'm done. So ironically, after he arrived, 3 years after he returned to St. Louis, he died from jaundice. So he was going to be dead anyway.
of all the things that could have got him jaundice, yeah.
At least he managed to start a family. He was married with a son after he returned to St. Louis in just 3 short years. So
Yes, good for him on that. Now, you had said that Lazarus fights on the side of the Indians on this. Was he fighting on the side of the Blackfeet at that point?
no, he was when he and his uncle first came out west, they befriended a group of Omaha, and while they were talking through sign language, uh a war party of Lakota. The Omaha and Lakota were enemies. So the Lakota attacked, and because Amos and Lazarus were friends to Omaha, they just made the decision to fight on the side of the Omaha. And that's who Lazarus, not only that, Lazarus managed to save the life of Omaha chief in a split second. And he also saved his uncle's life. And as a result, the Omaha chief gave him the name White Bear. For one, he's Lazarus is 6'6", about 260 pounds, but also he's pasty white and his hair is white. And that's kind of in the irony is that Lazarus' mom and his dad are brunette, but Lazarus' maternal grandfather has white hair, and he was 6'10" and 300 pounds. Remember, I told you he was a retired professional boxer. Lazarus' maternal uncle, Amos, is also pasty white and has white hair. So Lazarus basically inherited his maternal grandfather's genes, and they're the only members in the family that have white hair and are pasty white. So,
And if they're that big, they definitely look very bear-like.
yeah. So I can't, again, that's from the canyon of my mind. So,
Well, very
but
good. So at the end of the book, where do we end up in this one versus where we can go for the next one? Because I know you're already working on the next
yeah,
one.
I already started on the second book. I'm going to start chapter 3 this week. I already finished the introduction and the first 2 chapters. Basically, Lazarus ends up having 2 wives, and in the first book, how he meets them is basically different. I like I said, I don't want to say too much. I will say, um, his uncle ends up losing his life. So, but that's already mentioned in the introduction in the first in the begin in the first book in the introduction. Lazarus, in the introduction starts in 1822, and basically Lazarus is going over memories how he first came out west and how he met his wives. So it's very interesting. It's not, he didn't basically, especially how he met his second wife, he basically didn't save the day. She saved him and his first wife. And that's how they ended up together. So in the second book, which basically which takes a few months after the end of the first book in 1813, basically the War of 1812 is going on, and it has a sort of, from like a research, it has an effect on the fur trade. Manuel Lisa come hasn't come out west for a while. So Lazarus is trying to keep a promise. Lazarus, his flathead wife Darkwind, and his Nez Perce wife Mountain Flower, along with his uncle's widow Plainfeather, who's Crow, they're heading over the divide to take Mountain Flower back to her people. It was a promise Lazarus made to Mountain Flower, but he was sidetracked. So they're on their way back to they're on their way to the land of the Nez Perce. And according to what I written down in my journal, they encounter, well, basically, because of the War of 1812, they're going to have some issues with members of the Hudson Bay Company as well as the Blackfeet, who were historically mercenaries or traded with the Hudson Bay Company. So, um, that's what I have in mind for the second book. I already entitled it "The Great Divide."
Very good. So we have book 2 of The Frontier is The Great Divide.
And
And
my goal is to finish it before summer or by summer.
considering how fast you got book 1 out, I think you can probably achieve that.
Well, this one is probably a little bit difficult because I'm trying to get all the, because I don't have right now, I don't have any ideas how to get each chapter, each scenario going. So I'm just trying to take it a chapter at a time.
Do
So
you, do you try to outline your particular books, or you just
no,
go
no,
entirely on whatever
I,
happens?
I never outline. I just, whatever comes to my head, I just write, and I do it a chapter at a time. Basically, I start from writing the synopsis and the title in my journal, and I just take it from there.
So you know where they're going, but you don't know exactly how they get there.
Well, with this one, with the second one, The Great Divide, that's pretty much it. I also had the same problem with Saga of the Armstrong Brothers book 6, where the eagles fly. I was trying to figure out how that was going to go, because that was going to be the last book in that series.
Yeah. Well,
But
you're selling well in the hot new releases already on things, so that's good work on that.
thank
And
you.
yes, for just being out for a couple weeks here, that's very good on that. So we have that. We have your book here, Face of the Sun, to look forward to on things, and we got the new one coming out hopefully a little bit later this year. So very good
So,
stuff
like I
coming
said,
your way.
I'm hoping to finish it before summer. So, like I said, I'm just taking a chapter at a time and a day at a time.
Excellent. If fans want to get a hold of you, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, my email address is leroypeters36@yahoo.com. I have two email addresses. You can reach me there, or you can reach me on Gmail at leroypeters551@gmail.com. And also, you can also go to fantasticfiction.com, which promotes all my books. It's connected to Amazon. Once you go to fantasticfiction.com, in the author section, just type in Leroy A. Peters, and my profile will come up, and all my books will come up.
Excellent. Well, LeRoy, I appreciate you taking the time for us to talk to you today, and
Thank you.
congratulations again on getting the new book launched, and looking forward to the next one after that.
I'm looking forward to it too.